Lawyers of Reddit. Which case do you wish you never won? Welcome back, guys. If this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe because I do these videos every single day. Right before taking my bar exam in Germany, I was working in a small law firm as a law apprentice. There was one case which was given to me because it was considered unwinnable, but the client insisted on pushing through. The case was about an elderly lady who sold her cat because she was too sick to take care of her. The buyer of the cat, our client, a rather wealthy lady, took the cat to the vet right after buying it. Apparently the cat needed 2,000 euros worth of surgeries. She hired us to collect those 2,000 from the old lady. She was really an unpleasant woman, to say the least. She acted without even the slightest bit of remorse or empathy. She knew exactly in what situation the old lady was because she was the one who informed us about it. Nevertheless, we won the case pretty quick, even though our client didn't have a leg to stand on. How'd that happen? Do cats come with a warranty now? Did the seller give a health guarantee? One side had a lawyer and the other did not. Not a lawyer, I'm a paralegal who worked in insurance defense. One of our cases was trying to get the lowest possible amount for a guy who, while doing his job in a stationary car, was hit from behind at full speed. His car was off the road, the other driver was impaired, and his car was slammed into the 18-wheeler he was helping. He is forever handicapped and in a home, and our job was to get him way less than he deserved. I didn't want to work insurance defense anymore after that one. Yeah, that's fair enough. I had a misdemeanor stalking case once. Client wanted a jury trial, so we did that, and I had to question the poor girl who was getting harassed by this guy. The jury came back with a not guilty verdict, and my client turned to me and said incredulously, "They found me not guilty?" Yeah, that case. I won a case for a pharmaceutical company that was accused of selling contaminated products. My cases were all against people who had developed terminal illnesses, and I fought tooth and nail to discredit the scientific experts that the plaintiffs put on the stand. I started out losing cases, and the sting of a loss lasted a day or two. The mistrials were best because we kind of won, as in kicking the can down the road. Looking at a dying person when the jury read their verdict in my favor will never leave me. I didn't show up at work for months, then kind of sat at my desk for a few months, then eventually quit. I'm living off my savings now, not as much as you'd think, and volunteering for organizations that need lawyers. If I'd lost that case, I would have stayed in my happy world indefinitely. I'm glad I'm out of that world, but that win took its toll on my life. Not a lawyer, but when I was a paralegal, my boss got a sex offender acquitted of the most serious charge of first-degree sexual assault. We had a confession he given to our firm's hired shrink locked in my boss's desk drawer. During the trial, the lawyer had me, at the time a woman in my 20s, sit directly beside the perv so the jury could see I wasn't afraid of him. He insisted on taking the stand. During his testimony, I casually turned around to look at his wife. On her face was etched a look of horror. She, who knew him best, could tell he was lying. Up to that point, I guess she believed his story that the teenage employee was just after his money. I felt so gross after that and switched to a real estate and refinance law firm. This comment played out like a horror movie. Well done. I represented a foreign medical company. They have a worldwide monopoly in a treatment for a specific kind of cancer. They used to sell these treatments to hospitals and other public organizations. They had a fight with buyers for the price of the treatment. They wanted to be paid way more of the price set up by the hospitals, so they decided to fake a shortage in some of the components needed and stopped producing this product worldwide, leaving a lot of patients to certain death. After some time, they came back to produce that same product and their price demand was met. They had both criminal and civil consequences, but in the end I managed to reduce their responsibility to just a small economic fine, which was less than 0.001% of the profit they made with this whole operation. We took a copyright case to trial twice and then an appeal and won every time. The case was on contingency. The client doesn't pay unless you win. We have spent years trying to collect the judgment from the defendant so we can get paid. We have a judgment for our own fees that is close to $1 million, throwing good money after bad. The defendant hid his assets very effectively, put all hard assets into LLCs, got paid hundreds of thousands a year in cash and services to avoid banks, etc. He died of COVID-19 on Friday and was likely savvy enough to avoid probate. All of this is a gross oversimplification, but the TLDR is we won a case 3 times and have never been paid a cent because the loser was very shady and died, so we will likely get nothing for the client or ourselves. I bet he learned his lesson and won't do it again. Now that is dark. I used to prosecute neglect cases in big city in America for child protection services. After a few high-profile cases where young kids ended up dead at the hands of family members, CPS started asking us to file on pretty much everybody. I understand why, but I wish they would have stood up to the bad press instead of allowing it to dictate who they brought to court. From that point on, I would say about half my cases, even though a cause of action existed, I felt guilty for winning. I couldn't follow through this. Explain like I'm 5, please. He's a lawyer who represents CPS when they want to take kids off bad parents. A few high-profile cases happen where kids are murdered by parents because CPS didn't act in time, leads to a policy where they issue any excuse to get the kids away from parents. He's saying for many of those latter cases, he thinks the parents didn't deserve to lose custody. Was a labor lawyer for some time, and we had a no exception policy against using the company credit card for personal expenses. Everyone knows you get fired for it because they beat it into you with frequent training, make you sign stuff, etc. We fired a guy who was a few months from retirement and his union filed for arbitration. Arbitration is kind of a joke, and any labor lawyer will tell you that no arbitrator could uphold that termination even if the guy wasn't near retirement. We won. Due to the way the pension worked, the fact he left before he reached 55 led to a massive pension discount, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, by the way, his offense was filling up his car with gas using company card because he had left his personal card somewhere and was going to run out of gas. On the other side of the coin, I had many employees do insane things like hide and sleep at work for 40 hours, which led to a 30,000-gallon gasoline spill, fighting, death threats, etc., who all got their jobs back through arbitration. That's insane. I've used my company card on accident once or twice because it looks like one of my personal cards. I told them about it, and they just said I needed to write a check to cover the cost of the purchase, no additional explanation needed. Seeing lots of armchair lawyers in here, but I can tell you the cases we often wish we lost, the ones where clients don't pay their damn bills. Actually getting paid is one of the most stressful parts of practicing. My ex-husband owes his lawyer $16,000. She accidentally emailed me his invoice for our divorce, in which I didn't have a lawyer and got really screwed over, but he's very low income. I always wonder if his lawyer is ever going to get paid. At a certain point, it'll get sold to collections and then it's their problem. I used to do divorces, mostly. I'm not cut out for that work, but it's the job I could get out of law school. A guy came in for a divorce and seemed, by all accounts, really nice. He claimed that they had $50,000 in cash in their safe and that his wife had taken it out when she left the house. His ex-wife never worked, so it seemed reasonable that she would take the money to help pay bills, start over, etc. 6 months in though, when we were finalizing property, his true colors started to show. Refusing to let her have the toaster, arguing over giving her anything even though she hadn't worked their entire 15-year marriage, telling her she could have half of the expensive plants she tended to only if she came and got them herself without help. For reference, these plants were in a greenhouse and some weighed upwards of 100 pounds each. She probably weighed 100 pounds herself, extremely meek woman in her 60s. The other lawyer and I finally get everything settled except the $50,000. My client says she took it. Ex-wife says she did initially but then put it back on the advice of her attorney. So we go to trial just on this $50,000. I cross-examine her elderly parents, treat them as hostile, really go all out. Up against a veteran attorney who had been doing this for 30 plus years while I was brand new, I had to show my worth. In the end, the judge ended up declaring that the $50,000 was lost money. No one technically wins. 1 hour later, my client waltzes into the office and pays his $15,000 bill all in $100 bills. I just stared silently at the money while he smiled widely at me, thanked me for helping him, and then left. I quit practicing law entirely 3 months later. I still think about his ex-wife, who honestly seems sweet and lovely, and hope she's okay. That is a sad one. Worked for a large law firm. We won freedom for a suspected terrorist who probably did commit a very serious atrocity, but politics got in the way of convicting him. Sorry, cannot say which case this was. I've been living by the adage that politics poisons everything since the late 90s, and honestly, it's held completely true over the last 20 years and likely since well before then. When I was like 18 and 9/11 happened, I once heard my dad explain that he expected bin Laden would either A, be killed without capture, or B, never found. Point being, he said there is no reality where he gets captured, arrested, or ends up on trial. In his words, it was because any half-decent attorney could get him off scot-free and he could sue a lot of wealthy organizations for defamation of character and be set up/protected for life. He wasn't an attorney, of course. I just thought it was interesting. Not a lawyer, but I became friends with one after my friend took USAA to court after they wouldn't pay a claim where their member rear-ended her on her scooter after she stopped for a stop sign. Their lawyer kept talking to me to try to coach my friend on what to say, but she just wouldn't listen. He was a nice guy and wanted to help her since his client was obviously in the wrong. Unfortunately, USAA won and she was stuck with a $12,000 ER bill. Client hired IT consultants from another consulting firm. The firm basically found qualified people and rented them out, sort of like a recruiter, but they get fees forever, common in IT consulting. Client eventually thought he was paying too much, even though he agreed to it, and stopped paying. He owed $200,000. In New Jersey, you need to be licensed as a consulting firm. If you're not, you can't sue for your unpaid bills. They sued anyway, tried to argue some loopholes. We won, client paid nothing beyond my legal fees. Was I happy I won? Meh. Gave me a great story, great for my reputation, doesn't feel great helping out a douchebag though. I'm an underling who had no role in being able to reject the case, so that was a little bit of consolation at least. Don't feel too bad about it. These types of firms are usually scummy anyway, in regards to how much money they make compared to how much they decide to pay employees. I always thought it would be cool to be a lawyer until I had to pay $63,000 in attorney fees over the course of 2 years for custody of my daughter. Now, I'm not complaining so much about the money, more so about watching her attorney try to turn a turd into a piece of gold, no matter how irrefutable the evidence against her was. I wouldn't be able to live with myself or sleep at night defending on cases like that, where I would potentially be trying to return children to drugs, rape, abuse, neglect, etc. I represented a man accused of murder. I was able to get him off on a technicality during his arrest, but it was pretty clear he was guilty of the murder. I truly regret getting him off because he was most definitely guilty. Do you think he's a risk of being a repeat offender? Absolutely. The dude was an MS-13 who was the go-to dude to beat in new members. He was also not in the country legally. This was maybe 25 years ago. Lifelong public defender here? None. I will also say that my feelings for a client are rarely impacted by what they are accused of having done. I've had accused murderers whom I enjoyed working with. I've had accused shoplifters I wanted to strangle. I've often heard lawyers say that their job is not to convince a judge or jury that a defendant didn't kill someone, it's their job to use the ins and outs of the legal system to find some way that their defendant was not in violation of a law due to specific circumstances. Do you have any commentary on this? From all the criminal lawyers I know, it's actually to force the government to prove guilt via a watertight, fully legal case, basically ensuring that the courts and prosecution do their job completely and correctly, because if they don't, we could be sending innocent people to prison, and that's very bad. When I was an insurance defense attorney, there was a guy who sued one of my clients after she hit his car and hurt his neck. He was legitimately hurt bad enough to where he couldn't do his job anymore. I had to defend her, and I did a good job from her and her insurance company's perspective, and all he got was his past medical bills. The jury should have given him a lot more than that, and I have felt bad about that for years. For non-Americans, ICE is the federal agency that rounds up undocumented immigrants and deports them. An undocumented immigrant had been hired by a farm, and then the farm refused to pay. When he demanded his payment, the farmer turned him in to be deported. Since it was the second time that farmer had turned the guy in, it was unauthorized re-entry, a felony. The prosecutors really didn't want to go after the guy, really bad press. However, there was an ICE agent waiting right outside the courthouse. We thought that maybe if the guy does a couple months jail time, ICE forgets about him once he's let out, and in the meantime we could go after the farmer to get payment. Ultimately, we decided that we were criminal defense attorneys, not immigration lawyers or business lawyers, and we couldn't ethically allow a guy to go to jail if we could get him out of it. We filed a motion to dismiss on procedural grounds. The prosecution didn't oppose, and the guy was promptly rounded up by ICE, deported, never got his money, and could never come back to the US again. I feel like the farmer should have still had to pay the man whether or not he was deported. Isn't it on the employer to make sure that their employees are legal? How did the farmer not get some form of punishment for that? This story makes me so sad. None of them I want to win. I knew that I'd have a tougher time not being emotionally engaged with family law and crime and anything else really emotive, and so forged a career where it's companies and cash at stake. Now I work in-house as a litigator for a multinational company covering disputes throughout the world. I always do make sure that if we're thinking of litigating in a funky country, that the penalties aren't humane. No interest in someone getting executed or flogged for messing with the company. That's fair enough. I got a guy acquitted for DUI on a technicality. The officer failed to record the time of the accident and the time of his report, so the prosecutor couldn't prove his case. The guy got off free as a bird. I was assigned to do our firm's public defender volunteer work and got sent to a rural community to hear the cases for the evening. All easy stuff, traffic tickets, some disorderly persons, etc., until I got to one public intoxication and DUI. I got his case, read his history, and saw that he had never taken advantage of a program that would allow the court to stay sentencing if he agreed to counselling and stayed clean for some period of time. Can't remember, maybe 6 months or something, it was a while ago. So, I got him to agree. Worked with the prosecutor, judge agrees, license was suspended, but sentence of 90 days was stayed pending outcome of counselling and clean record. Guy was ecstatic. I was pleased with my cleverness. We all went home happy. I get a call from the prosecutor the next morning. My guy was in the freaking morgue, dead as a post. Seems he was so happy with my work that he went out, got drunk and passed out along one of the back roads and got himself run over. The only upside was that he couldn't drive and kill anyone else, but the guy that killed him was a wreck. His wife and son were a wreck. They all blame me. If only I had let them send him to jail, he would still be alive. I stopped practicing law not long after that. It's about 10 years and I have never regretted leaving it behind. That is so unfair. How can they possibly blame him for that guy dying? Personal feelings or opinions have no place when the case is actually being run. We signed up to be professionals in the justice system. That is doubly reason for us to be objective and leave our personal feelings out. Yes, behind the scene we all have our opinions on clients, be it positive or negative, but when it comes to actually conducting the case, we separate this very clearly. It seems the original poster is somewhat hinting at the criminal case direction, i.e. I helped a super racist, arsonist, mass murderer that burned down an orphanage. Many of us do other matters and probably don't even litigate. Many matters also settle before court. Yeah, it's still a fun question. You were just dying to give this speech. I agree. Divorce lawyers should come pouring in. They get terrible women full custody and a hefty child support payment with limited visitation for the father, even if he was taking more care of the children than her. Can confirm. My mother has been medicated for seizures and the medication doesn't do much for her attitude. Pretty much is one of the most emotionally abusive and hypocritical people I've ever met in my life, and yet the judge gave her custody of me over my father despite him out earning her and overall being an infinitely better parent. At the very least, my dad has never tried to take revenge against me for something I haven't done. I handled a case for a friend. His landlord was a terrible woman and she refused to renew their lease. When he moved out, there were allegations that he completely trashed the house. 2 months later, she filed suit against him for the damages. However, the lease required her to return his security deposit or provide an accounting of why it was withheld within 30 days. She didn't. Under the law, she then lost any right to withhold it because she failed to end the accounting. I countersued and she had to pay his full deposit, all of his costs, and all of my attorney fees. But I can't really say I wish I had lost. She should have done what was required, and I am way too competitive to ever wish I had lost. That is the opposite of this question. And I think that's a good sign we should end the video. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you all tomorrow.